Welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I'm Kelly Noonan-Gorse, and every week I speak to the leading doctors, healers, spiritual teachers, and scientists to find out what is truly possible when it comes to healing. I also interview real people with extraordinary healing stories. My philosophy is, what's possible for one is possible for all. Thank you for joining me on this beautiful journey of remembering our divine nature and tapping into the truths that shall set us free. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Heal with Kelly podcast. I am so excited to welcome Carlos Whittaker to the podcast today because he is going to teach us all how to reconnect because we are all so connected in so many ways and so disconnected in so many ways. Carlos, welcome to the show before I tell them a little bit about you.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, Kelly. I'm so excited to hang out with you and your incredible audience. And not only teach, but to learn. Every time I get interviewed, I learn something about myself. So I'm pretty excited to figure out what that's going to be today.
I mean, look at you. You're already connecting in such a
That's
beautiful
right.
way.
Yes.
I love it. All right. So Carlos Whittaker is bringing hope to humans all over the world, and he's pretty good at it. He's an author, podcaster, and global speaker, backed by the power of a massive Insta familia.
Yes.
His enthusiastic social followers who tune in daily to join forces with Carlos to find connection, do good, and be in community. When Carlos enters a room, he makes people feel seen, like he just did right now. His superpower is creating spaces online and in person where people are safe to engage in conversation about topics that matter most, but are often avoided. His motto, don't stand on issues, walk with people. That's beautiful. Yeah. That's the professional stuff. But all day, every day, Carlos is a family man. He and his wife, Heather, live in Nashville, Tennessee, with their amazing children. There's 3 of them, and where you can find them working on the family farm. Ooh, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Planning trips around the world and dancing to all the single ladies.
Yes.
All right. And he gave me a little ditty of country music before we started. So we'll have him sing a little later. But awesome, Carlos.
Well, yes. Wow.
We're here. Sorry, go ahead.
Let me just jump straight into that.
Okay.
That intro. You read that intro so well. And I'm like, wow, every time I hear that, I'm like, that is me. I'm just so grateful that that's my life right now. So yeah, I'm entering into this conversation in gratefulness because I'm a blessed guy right now. It's pretty fun.
But it seems like you vibe gratitude, which has gotten you to be at a place in life where you have so much to be grateful for. I can tell where gratitude is not new and as a result of this beautiful life, but it's kind of what got you here. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is very correct. I think as the son of 2 first-generation immigrants into this country, watching, growing up, they just worked so hard. They were just so grateful for every single thing. And I think that poured out on me, and I poured that out on my kids. And, there's millions of things every day if you just open your eyes, gaze up, and glance down that you can be grateful for. So yeah, I kind of live my days looking for that.
Speaking of gazing up, it's something we rarely do because our faces are always glued to our phones, which tend to be down. Even just like chiropractors around the world are saying,
yes,
we're going to evolve hunched forward. So I'm trying to lift my phone
there
up.
There you
go. But there's so much up in the world and on our daily, we go to the same stores in the same way and take the same routes to work. And we rarely do we look up.
Yes.
Which gets us into, I started reading your book. I didn't finish it yet, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
You talk about the difference between notifications and noticing.
Yes, absolutely.
So I don't know. Do you want to start there? Do you want to just tell us about Reconnected?
Let's start there.
All right.
The book is called Reconnected. Subtitle, How 7 Screen-Free Weeks with Monks and Amish Farmers Helped Me Recover the Lost Art of Being Human. So initially that subtitle, I told my publisher, I was like, that's so long. But then I was like, but it actually tells everybody what the book is about. So you got it. And one of the things that was a drastic shift for me in those 7 weeks was, you're right, the difference between notifications and noticing, and how I spent 7.5 weeks. I never got one single notification on my person, not on my wrist, not in my pocket. Nothing buzzed or dinged to take me away, to take my eyes away from the current reality of the conversation I was in with the person across from me. So I was never taken to an alternate universe by a buzz in my pocket, because that's actually what happens when we're in community with somebody, when we're talking to somebody, even if it's in your pocket and you don't stick your hand in your pocket and pull your phone out. Just that little tap 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 from your phone is taking you out of your present moment, and your presence is gone, and your brain goes, well, what was that about? Oh, what time is it? I wonder if that was my daughter texting me that, and you go 1,000 places, even if it's just for 1 second, and you come back. And I just don't think we were built as humans to do that. And so, yeah, one of the things that I fell in love with during those 7.5 weeks was, I never had a single notification that distracted me away from the current present reality I was in with the person in front of me. So one of the things that I've done in the last year and a half since I've done this social experiment, is my phone is on permanent do not disturb. So like, I literally never get a notification. Now, it was annoying at the beginning to some of my family and friends that like I wouldn't just be like on call the second they needed something. When I pick up my phone, all the notifications are still there. Like, they're still there for me, but they're just not interrupting me anymore. So now, like, the only time I get one is when I look at my phone. I'm like, oh, my daughter texted me. I should text her back, right? And so I suddenly now am back in charge of my life, as opposed to this 6 inches of LCD, which suddenly I think has been hijacking a little bit of our humanity.
Totally. And we wonder why mental health is tanking in this country and beyond. And then on the other extreme of that, and you went to spend some time with the Benedictine monks,
Yes.
but every spiritual master, has said that enlightenment is found in the present moment. So we're getting those
Yes.
vibrations, those dings, those distractions every moment. We are getting further away from enlightenment, which is true
Yes.
contentment and joy.
Yep.
And, obviously spiraling down into this mental health, because like you said, we're just not evolved. Our brains aren't evolved to process this much information in real time.
No, the phrase that I like to say is, our souls and our psyche were not created with the capacity to consume the amount of content we consume. They just weren't. And I can get into people can get into evolution and how we've evolved, and I'm like, I'm sorry. I just, if you just, like you said, look at the mental health crisis that is happening across the planet. Okay. I don't care how much evolution has happened with our minds. I don't think our souls are evolving. And I think our souls, whatever you want to call your soul, whatever that is, I think it's pure. And I think it's always been, and it always will be. And we've got to care for it. And we just weren't created for this. Like, there's just so much coming in constantly, that when I was able to disconnect, to reconnect for 7.5 weeks, oh my gosh, Kelly, like just, it was like, the only way I can explain it to people is, when I moved to Nashville, Tennessee, I developed adult asthma. So I didn't have asthma as a kid. So
Hmm.
Tennessee's like super, pollen and super, allergic. So I get here and my wife's like, hey, like, you're wheezing every night. And I was like, really? She's like, yeah. She's like, you should go to an allergist. So I go to an allergist. Allergist tells me, they do allergy testimony. They're like, yeah, you're allergic to Tennessee. Sorry, bro. Like, everything, you're allergic to the whole state. So I'm like, oh, what do I do? He's like, well, hey, here's an inhaler. I want you to take a hit of the inhaler. And I was like, but I feel fine. Like, I don't need an inhaler. He's like, no, you're wheezing, which means you're only using a certain percentage of your lungs. So I took a hit. The next breath I took, I went from, like, I don't know, 70% lung capacity to 100. And I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to breathe. And that's what happened to me on day 3 at that monastery. And for the rest of the 7 weeks, I was breathing, I feel breathing life in the way that our souls were created to breathe in life. And there was no longer this pollution that was causing me to only breathe at 60 to 70%. And so, once you experience breathing at 100% again, you don't ever want to go back to 70%. So, anyway.
That's a beautiful analogy, metaphor. I also love in the book, this is just, you're so funny, by the way. I just want to give you
Thank you.
kudos to that. Like, you're such a great writer. And I was listening to the book, so you're very funny in your delivery. But you said you got that fresh breath of what it's like to be present and back as a human on day 3. My favorite part was on day two where you're like, I can't do this. I got like day two, like the
Eject.
second day, you were like ejecting.
Out of I was supposed to do this for 7 weeks and it was day 2 and I was like, all right, I'm going to write a book about 2 days without my phone. Like I can, I think I've learned everything I need to learn. It was horrible. Like I was having legitimate physical manifestations of anxiety. Like when I went from 7 hours and 23 minutes a day on my phone to 0 minutes a day on my phone, and my brain had nowhere to go. I didn't have TikTok to numb it. I didn't have any of the other drugs that we use on our phones to numb the brain. I had to be fully present with who I was 24/7. It took 48 hours and I was losing my mind. Heart palpitations, night sweats, tight chest, all these anxiety symptoms that finally, it took 3 days, but on day 4, morning 4, is when it felt like an elephant stepped off of my chest. But it definitely was jarring to not only my mind, but to my body.
But that's like real physiological. Like this, we are addicted to our
We,
devices. That
we,
is withdrawals.
it is withdrawals, and the one thing that I think was super helpful for me, because I tell people this book isn't about why phones are bad. There's enough books about why phones are bad. This book is about why it's beautiful on the other side of the phone. And so what I learned really quickly was I thought I was addicted to my phone. I was like, well, that's the problem. I'm addicted to my phone. But very quickly, Kelly, I realized the phone is not the drug. The phone is the needle. And a heroin addict isn't addicted to the needle. They're addicted to the heroin that's coming through the needle. So when I started looking at my phone as a needle, I began to realize I can either have good drugs or bad drugs that are coming through this. And what I realized very quickly was I was actually addicted to control, which came from the knowledge that my phone was giving me. So suddenly I realized my addiction was knowledge that led to control, because suddenly I felt out of control. How fast are my kids going? Are they on Life 360? I wonder if anyone needs me. All these things make me feel this false sense of security in my control. We're not in control. We love to think that we're in control. We can only control what we can control, which is not a whole lot. This phone gave me a false sense of that, and that was the drug that I was addicted to. So, yeah, my physical manifestations of anxiety were coming because I no longer had the control that I thought I needed. And a couple days went by, I realized, oh, it's actually a lot better to live this way than it did to live the other.
And maybe I mean, that is so profound, this control realization, because I'm
Yeah.
having like a parallel situation in my life where
Yeah.
I've been really grasping, like, if I don't know the truth, I
Yes.
can't be safe,
Yes.
And so, like, I've been like, or in like a relationship, like, I must know everything. And then the other person that I'm relating to is like,
Sure.
I, you don't need to know everything. It's just going to
Yeah.
stress you out. I'm protecting you. And I'm like, no, I really
Yeah.
need to know everything,
Yeah.
that makes me feel
Yeah.
safe. But as you're talking, it is such an illusion. And that,
Mm.
like,
Yeah.
life is so out of control. And there is a divine, I mean, I think it's in a good
Yes.
way. Like, there's a
Yes.
divine intelligence orchestrating it all.
Yes.
And so if we can lean in or lean back into that faith and let it unfold and, be okay with it, like, but so
Yes.
as you're
It's hard.
talking, it's
Yeah.
so hard. It's
Yeah.
so hard. But
Yeah.
these phones are deepening
Yeah.
or exacerbating this illusion of control.
Yes, absolutely. They are. They're deepening this illusion of control that my mom, it's so funny. My mom and dad live across the street from me. My father has dementia, and so my mother's his caregiver. So I bought the house across the street so I could help her. And so I see them every day. This has been like the last year. And one of the things that my mom told me, because I have Life 360 with my kids, right? So I got teenagers, I can kind of see where they're at, how fast they're going. She just told me, she's like, I'm so glad that when you were 16, I did not have these things to tell me where you were or how fast you were going, because can I tell you what that would have done and what it's actually doing to you, and you don't know it? You think you have control, but what you actually have is anxiety and worry, because what's happening is I didn't worry. I just trusted. If I said be home when the streetlights turned on, you had to be home when the streetlights turned on. And there was a trust in our relationship that isn't there today anymore with parents and teenagers. And I'm glad I didn't have, and almost my jaw was hanging open because I was like, she's so right. Like, it's this control that we're addicted to, that it's like, maybe we know too much about everything. Maybe knowledge is the drug that some people are addicted to. And it's like, the more I know, the more in control again I
Yeah.
feel like I am.
And
But
we
and how's that going for you, right? Like I ask everybody, how is all the knowledge in the world how's that working out for you? Like, is it adding to peace into your life? Maybe a little bit, but it's really an illusion, the control that we think we have.
And it's overwhelming to the senses. It's
Yes,
just
it is.
cannot process it all the information.
No.
So you mentioned these beautiful, like you talk about wondering and getting lost, and I want you to go into it, but before you talk about that, like even in asking that question, we don't we have Google. I mean, the God of
Oh.
Google can give us information, most of it true, some of it not, at our fingertips. And like it got me wondering
Hmm.
about life back in the day when we were
Yes.
curious about something. We didn't have a
Yes.
smartphone. We sought out people who knew more than we did and had
Hmm.
conversations and connection, or we would get
Yes.
out the encyclopedia and piece
Yes.
together what we could. It is wild. We don't, just in that shift alone, we
It's
don't
gone.
connect with humans with curiosity. We just go to Google.
Yes, it's gone. It curiosity. I think curiosity actually may be the word that bridges the division that most people are feeling on a day-to-day basis, right? Like I hear all the time, we're more divided than we've ever been. And I'm like, I mean, actually, if you go to the library and open up a history book, you open up to the middle of any history book, we're not more divided than we've ever been. Like it feels that way because we have more access to everyone's opinions than we've ever had before. So that's what we're feeling. We're not feeling the division. We're feeling the access to more knowledge, right? Again, this is knowledge, this is control. And what you were saying um about like what it was like before to be curious and have to connect with a wise mentor or a sage or somebody that is like beyond you, as opposed to like now everyone on TikTok's an expert because they watched a 90-second TikTok video and it's like on a war that's happening around the world and it's like, well, nope, I watched this video, I'm an expert now, I can just consider. And it's like, actually no, this is causing, I think, more and more harm. So again, we're talking about some of the downfalls of these screens. They're making these overnight experts of people that truly, like, if we wonder more and don't go to our phones when it's time to wonder, because Google is the wonder killer. I call it the wonder killer. Like wondering used to be something that my generation used to do. If I was in high school and I had a question about something, like I just had to wonder about it. Like there was like you said, I have to go to the encyclopedia, open it up, then I'd get a little bit. Right, the encyclopedia would only give you a paragraph, right, like about what it was, and it's like, well, that's all I know. And then so you have to keep wondering, and I wonder how many incredible ideas have been lost, how much creativity has been taken away because we no longer wonder, we no longer sit in contemplative questioning spaces where we just think and we wonder and we have solitude. And so yes, when I was with the monks and I had questions about their life and it was 23 hours a day of silence and I wondered something, I couldn't pull my phone out to Google it. I just had to sit and wonder, I just had to do that. And so that's something that I do now to put handlebars on this part of the conversation. Whenever I say I wonder, or whenever anyone around me at dinner or if I'm with a friend says I wonder, and immediately people reach in their phones for their devices, I go, stop. We're just going to wonder. And everyone's like, what do you mean? But we can find out. I was like, I know we can. Isn't that so bad? Like, I wish we couldn't. So let's just sit here and talk about it. What do you think? What do you think? And next thing you know, we're having the most beautiful conversation because we're wondering again.
I love it so much. And it makes me think of, and I don't know if this is accurate because I never Googled it,
Yeah.
but during COVID, when everything was shut down, I had heard that Newton, Sir Isaac Newton, physics guy,
Yep.
apple on the
The
head.
apple on the head
Yeah,
guy.
apple on the head guy. I think like London or the main city where he lived was shut down because of the bubonic plague, or it was similar like pandemic vibes.
Yeah.
And they were out in the countryside, like quarantining. And so he only had time to wonder because he couldn't be in his lab and he couldn't talk to people. So he was
Yes.
out sitting under a tree, apple fell,
Yeah.
and boom, like, major framework of a discipline in
Totally.
our sciences was
Can
born.
you imagine if Homeboy was not vibing in the countryside and he was busy in his lab, that apple never fell, like we wouldn't be able to bounce around like we are these days. We wouldn't be able to play basket, all these things that his law helped us with, right? So yes, I think wondering is so important. And again, I don't want people to, I think it's important that you said that, to just think that it's the screens, right? That it's like these screens. There was a when I was doing research for the book, there was an article I came across that said in it's like a New York Times article in like 1912, a cover article that said that all these boys are addicted to their kaleidoscopes. And I don't know if you know what a kaleidoscope is, but it's it's this thing that you twist it and there's glass and makes all these beautiful
The
patterns.
first
That
psychedelic experience.
Yes. And that these boys were walking around the streets of New York. They said it was a hazard to society because they were looking through their kaleidoscope and walking off the sidewalks, running into things, almost getting hit by things. And so the article was talking about how the kaleidoscope was going to be the downfall of man, how man was going to become addicted to the kaleidoscope. And I think this is just the next kaleidoscope. This phone is that next thing. And so if we can fall back in love with living on the other side of it, that's where all the beauty is going to come from. So wonder more. If anybody in your little friend group ever says I wonder, stop them from pulling their phone out and just sit and wonder with them. It'll be fascinating.
That's amazing. I mean, just walk us through wondering. You just have a conversation and you just like have hypothetical, like, I
Oh,
wonder, like, for instance, I just heard, and this is going to timeline this episode, but
sure.
the headline right now is that Ukraine sent 6 American missiles into
Yes.
Russia. I'm
Yes.
not an expert. I get
Yep.
like what I can. I don't really trust the media, so I don't even
Sure.
know where to get honest information at
Yeah.
this point. But there's a lot of opinions out there, but it's nice to just sit and have a conversation with
Yeah.
your friends, wondering
Yeah.
what is this going to lead to,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it takes discipline to have a conversation, a crucial conversation in a grace-filled way about some very important issues like this. This would be a very important issue. Rockets are flying across, the sky towards humans. But to be able to have conversations where you literally are just being curious in your wondering with your friends instead of being like, well, I heard on this podcast this morning. No, 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 no. Let's take any of that I heard from a podcast this morning. That's not really wondering. Let's actually just sit and wonder about let's get beyond let's get beyond maybe the news cycle and just maybe wonder about like what are the implications of this for the people that are having to deal with this right now far away from us. And then we can wonder what are the implications for us if this escalates into something else. And so like as much as for wondering for me, I try to remove um any sort of like uh anyone else's opinion outside of the scope of my friend circle. Like if we're talking about someone else's opinion, no, we can talk about yours, but not somebody. And so like I think wondering is just this, it's a lost art.
Mhm.
It's something that's no longer there. When I was, I'll date myself, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I remember walking into a Turtles record and music store. So I was buying a CD, and back in those days, you had to get like a demo CD, and you'd put it in a demo CD player and put headphones on to listen. And there was a cutout of this beautiful lady, and I thought, oh, she's gorgeous. Like, who is this? I'm in love with her. And it was Mariah Carey, and it was like her first record. And I remember wondering who she was, and none of my friends that I was with had ever heard of it, so no one knew. Then I went to the front counter and I asked the person that I was buying the CD from, hey, do you know who this is? Nope. I have no idea. We just got the CD yesterday. So I listened to her music for a month until I saw her on MTV and just wondered. I was just, who is this person? Like, just wondering was actually like a normal, almost like integral part of our human experience. And we think, if you think now, like that has been almost all but eliminated and extinct from our human experience anymore. That'll make you stop and pause and think, maybe I need to infuse a lot more wondering, which leads to wonder back into my life.
I mean, I literally had to ask how we do it because I don't know. It's like so extinct that I forgot how we wondered.
I know.
But like I remember the payphone days, our
Yeah.
parents were like, okay, they're 30 minutes late. They were wondering where we were. There's
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
is a lost art. It's wild.
Wondering isn't asking the question, isn't saying I wonder. People say, oh, no, I wonder all the time. I say I wonder. No, that's not wondering. That's the point A, the very beginning of wondering. Wondering happens after you say I wonder blank. I wonder where, I wonder how, I wonder when. That's when wondering happens. And so I try to force myself to wonder a lot more these days.
Amazing. I really want people to read the book. So I don't want you to like walk through the
Sure.
whole journey.
Yeah.
Because I really feel like this will be just some good drugs to give people through
Yes.
the needle,
Yeah.
But give top 1 or 2 ahas from the Benedictine monks, and then let's move on to the Amish.
Yeah, sure. Um, well, one aha was wondering, because that was day one when I was wondering about something they were doing, and I tried to pull my phone out to find out, and I didn't have one, so I just had to wonder. Um, Probably another thing is I call it Godspeed, so people can call it whatever, higher intelligence they want to say, but I believe that like we were created as humans to walk in a certain rhythm and certain pace, and so the average human being walks at 3 miles an hour. 3 miles an hour. And so initially, when I got to the monks, they did everything so slowly. Like they ate so slowly. They talked so slowly. They walked so slowly. And I'm like, come on, pick it up. We got things to do. I need a monk more. I got a monk. I got to learn to be a monk, but then I really quickly realized, oh my gosh, I think we were created to live at 3 miles an hour. Like, like what happened when I started living at 3 miles an hour with the monks? I started noticing everything. I walked everywhere. Like one time I was walking somewhere and I smelled a rose garden. And I remember being like, oh, stop and smell the roses. Like I can literally smell it. So I'm looking for the roses and I find the roses and I'm like, oh, they're beautiful. If I was even in a golf cart going a little bit faster than 3 miles an hour, I wouldn't have been able to smell it. So there's all sorts of things in our senses that I think we were created us to see, to smell, to feel when we get back to 3 miles an hour. So I've got a whole chapter on 3 miles an hour. What does that look like? How can we apply that in our life? Another thing that the monks taught me is savoring. I think that's also another lost art. We don't savor anymore because we've been bred to multitask now. Everything we're never doing one thing at a time. If you're watching a movie, you got your phone in your hand and the Netflix on. So you're not even savoring the movie anymore because we've split our minds, right? And so I explain it this way, and because we can get used to things really fast, and so we forget to savor. So like if you're walking, say for instance, I was in Italy last summer with my family and I remember walking by a bakery and I remember smelling the bakery and I was like, oh my gosh, it smells amazing. I need to go get a croissant or something. So I walk in there and then I order the croissant and I'm sitting there and I'm sipping my cappuccino and I'm eating the croissant and it tastes so good and I'm having conversation. And the next thing you know, 5 minutes later, someone else walks in and they're like, oh my gosh, it smells amazing in here. And I realized something. I can no longer smell it. Like it was gone. Like actually what drew me in, I had gotten used to and I could no longer smell it anymore. So what did I have to do? I got up and I walked out and I walked back in and suddenly I could smell it again. So I learned about slowing down and savoring and what does it take to really enjoy and savor that first cup of coffee in the morning. Can I tell you something, Kelly? The first cup of coffee you drink in the morning tastes so much better when you're not scrolling on your phone. You get to sense every bit of it. So what do I do in my morning routine now? I've got an alarm clock that wakes me up. My phone no longer wakes me up. My phone's plugged in the kitchen. The alarm clock wakes me up. I don't pick it up and start rubbing its face, start touching it like I do my phone. It has one job. It wakes me up. Then I go and I make my cup of coffee. And then I drink my cup of coffee and I savor it. And then here's the thing. I deleted all the news apps off my phone. This is stuff that because of the monks I've done. And I no longer read the news because I don't think, like I said before, we were created to consume the amount of content we consume. So I walk out in my front yard in the morning and I picked up, wrapped in plastic in my driveway every morning, some human throws a newspaper in my driveway. And I open up, just like my dad did in 1992, I open up the newspaper and I read the news for 30 minutes. And if anything else happens on planet Earth, I'll find out tomorrow when I pick up my newspaper. So there's all these practices that I've put into place to help me recover the lost art of savoring, of wondering, of noticing. And that's really what I got from the monks.
And let's rewind a little bit because as you're saying that, I'm like, wow, he's kind of like resetting his whole nervous system through this new realization and practices. You actually went in to get a brain scan from Dr. Amen.
Yes.
Amen Clinics. What did you discover before? And that's a beautiful, get into the dementia thing. And then what did you discover after
Very
this?
important. Yes. So I was grateful that Dr. Amen allowed me to come in and scan my brain before and after the experiment. And also he did cognitive memories testing on me, which was actually really fascinating, even more fascinating, I think, than the brain scan. So when I went in there the day before I gave up my phone and my screens, I did the spec scan. He's like, yeah, there's a couple lumps in your brain. I think there's some activity that's not happening. I think we can make this better. But your cognitive memory score is at the 50th percentile of men in America. So I was like, completely average, right in the middle of memory. When I finished 7.5 weeks later, didn't look at a screen, didn't look at a phone, nothing, and I got my brain rescanned. He said that my cerebellum, which is the largest part of my brain, healed about 5 years in those 7 weeks. And here's the kicker. My cognitive memory score went from the 50th percentile to the 99th percentile. There was only 1% of men in America with better memory than me when it was over. I've got a father with dementia. I talk a lot about that on my socials. So brain health is a big deal for me. When I realized that this screen was causing me to lose 49% of my memory, it blew my mind. And so, yeah, so I shifted a lot, literally just based on that one result.
And just that little, I mean, that's remarkable. And also, I need to do that same fast because my memory, I'm only 45 and I'm like, I got to get on this. Like,
I get it. I get it.
But obviously, Heal with Kelly, the Heal podcast, Heal documentary. It's
Yes.
all about the body's ability to regenerate and heal. Like, we're literally
Yes.
just designed to heal in every moment, and we're getting in the way. And it's just so, I just like want to highlight this. Just 7 weeks of a fast from your phone and these habits,
Mhm.
your brain
Yes.
heals and reverses like 5 years, and
Yes.
your memory goes up 50%. Like,
Yeah.
those are like earth-shattering statistics.
Earth shattering. And, and I remind people, I'm like, and this is what Dr. Amen said when I was in his office, because he was like, whoa, this is really fascinating. He said, now listen, this isn't a scientific experiment, right? I'm the only data point. I'm the only lab rat. There's not a whole bunch it was just me. So at the end of the day, it's like, this is what I love about it though. It's like, who knows what it was a combination, right? It was a combination of not looking at my phone, but also, I prayed 6 times a day with these monks. I meditated with these monks. I worked the land with my hands with the Amish. I was shearing sheep and doing things physically that I'd not done ever in my life. I was exhausted from the physical labor that I was doing every day. So like it was a combination, I think, of all of these uniquely human practices that I was doing again, that I think, and I love your documentary and book and like how you say that we're constantly just, our bodies are trying to be like, look, yo, I'm healing here. Quit getting in the way. And then when I got out of the way, look what happened. I began to heal. So
Yeah. And probably, like you said, like, maybe the control is just getting off the phone, or the control would be do nothing, but you enhanced actually with these, like, I think these spiritual practices like prayer and meditation, obviously
yes,
those enhance, that's like an enhancer to the fast.
yes,
And so maybe go into that, art of being human. We are spiritual beings. I know you're a faithful man
yeah.
having a human experience. So to carve out time, you talk a little bit about like what's the difference between like solitude and connection and just being lonely and bored.
Lonely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Um, you can be lonely in a room of 100 people, and you're not having solitude. So like I want people to understand that like the goal isn't loneliness here. They were actually some very lonely moments that I was, especially at the monastery. Like I was crying. Like I was lonely, and loneliness isn't the goal, but there were some beautiful moments of solitude, solitude where like I actually finally had to come face to face with me, face to face with who I am, face to face with my belief systems and the structures and the scaffolding that I built my life on, that I can no longer get inspirational quotes from Kelly on Instagram that could help me out during the day. I was just stuck without Kelly's words. I was stuck without all these great minds' words, and I was just left with me and whatever greater thing I thought I had. And so I had to face that, and I think solitude is, um, if you think about it, up until the car radio was put in, every single human being on planet Earth, if they were traveling from point A to point B alone, existed in solitude. That there was always solitude. But once we had access to more, to be able to consume, whether it be music or AM radio or whatever, that solitude became extinct. So we're the first generation of humans to walk the face of the earth that is on the brink of having solitude be something that is extinct. And I just think that's something that we need to invite back in to our lives. So, simple handlebars, more car rides in silence.
Hmm.
Don't listen to, don't listen to mine and Kelly's podcast, every single, even though it's amazing, you're going to listen to it again. No, the next car ride, just do it in silence and just see maybe some great ideas that come to pass because you're able to just sit in solitude like Newton underneath that apple tree.
And also this is like now making me think of my 5-year-old, and I'm pretty liberal with screens, but because I am, and she just kind of does it in the morning
Yep.
so I can get my stuff done because my morning is my sacred time. But then she doesn't like ask for it the rest of the day unless she's having like an emotional meltdown and
Sure.
needs like a little escape. But for the most part, she's, and so I'm just thinking even about the brain healing that happened
Yeah.
off screens, and
Yes.
without all that stimulation, knowing what that onslaught, like you said, it's not the device, it's the onslaught of information
Yes. Yes.
and stimulation, like what's that doing to our child's brain development?
You know, living with the Amish, my little Amish sidekick was named Lane, and Lane was 4 years old, and he was the grandson of Willis, the Amish sheep farmer I was living with. And Lane's fully Amish, running around with overalls and Amish hat, barefoot. Mr. Carlos, come here, Mr. Carlos, come here. He's, we're going all over the place. He was having a blast, and we live near some Amish here in Nashville. We go down to Etheridge, Tennessee, and I remember when my kids were little, we'd go visit the Amish to get bread or a furniture or something, and I'd see these little Amish kids walking by with their little wagons, and I legitimately used to think, oh my gosh, those poor kids. Oh my, like those poor kids. I literally felt bad for them. And then when I lived with the Amish and I'm seeing Lane, and Lane is like, knows everything about horses, everything about farming at 4. He's helping his dad, do horseshoes and all these things. And I pulled out my camera because I had a Sony camera, just so everybody knows. I made a documentary. I had a little camera with me that I would film myself every night talking to it so I could remember when I was writing my book. And I was talking to it, and Lane came by me, and I'll never forget. Lane, no, we were in a buggy. Lane goes, "What's that?" And I was like, "Oh, I guess he doesn't understand what's happening." I go, "Oh, this is a camera." And his dad's kind of laughing in the horse and buggy as we're going down. He's like, "That's a camera, Lane." And Lane's like, "What's that?" And I was like, "Well, I'm kind of leaving somebody a message, and then they're going to watch it later." And he just looked at me so confused. And that night, we were sitting by sorry, the story's a little long, but I think it's so helpful if you think
Right.
about kids. That night, we're sitting by the fire. We sit by the fire every night they live on a county road, and it's just horse and buggies. And every once in a while, like a car will come by, and a car came by with these kids in the back of the minivan. And they were in the back of the minivan. It was like sunset, beautiful sunset. And they were looking at their screens, just like my kids were looking at their screens and looking at their screens. But I remembered that was the first time that it switched for me. And I looked at those kids, and instead I thought, oh, poor kids.
Wow.
It was such a shift where I used to look at little Amish kids and I was like, oh, poor kids. And then when I saw them, I literally mumbled to myself, oh, poor kids. And I was like, what just happened to me? What happened to me is the realization that, I think by that point I realized, because I went to the Amish second, at that point I realized, oh, like we're never going to get away from screens, but we definitely can be raising our kids with a little bit more purpose, I think. So yeah, it was a pretty big aha moment for me.
That's profound to happen
Yeah.
in 7 weeks
Yeah.
or 5 weeks, whatever you were into it for. But as you talk about that, it just makes me think like all these health crises that we have. I mean, we
Mm,
could pinpoint there's a whole slew of factors and
yeah.
toxicity in our food and on our environments and medications and all these things. But like ultimately, I think we are so sick because we've disconnected from nature. We are part of
Mm,
nature. Half of our human system is made up of microbes that like
yes.
are deeply connected to our environment and information and everything is exchanging. So as you talk about the Amish's schedule and working with the land and no electricity and like on just in sync with nature cycles and light and dark and
Yeah.
circadian rhythms, like they are happier and healthier because they're in rhythm with, like you said, Godspeed.
Absolutely. I mean, they're in one of the things that was so intriguing to me about the Amish in particular and their rhythms with nature and rhythms with farming and the earth is how they didn't rely on any sort of external data, what with the weather app on their phone or whatever, to like make decisions on farming. Like, we've been waiting to cut the hay. Listen, I'm a city boy, so like the fact that like you have to wait 7 days to cut the hay was like, I was like, why is it taking so freaking long to cut the hay? Like, let's cut the hay. And Willis is like, we got to wait until there's not going to be rain for 2 days, because if you cut the hay and then it rains on the hay before the hay dries, it'll mess up the hay, and then the cows can't eat the hay. So like, there's this whole circle of hay making life I didn't know about. So we've waited 7 days, And it finally, like the day before, it's like not going to rain. I was like, sweet, we're going to cut the hay tomorrow. So I wake up in the morning, it's like thunderclouds outside. And I was like, we can't cut the hay today. I was so pissed. And I walked up to Willis and I was like, Willis, bro, like we've been waiting 7 days to cut the hay. Like we can't cut the hay today. Look at the thunderclouds. It's raining like a mile away. He's like, I want you to look at your boots. I was like, what? He's like, look at your boots. And I'm like, what kind of Amish thing is this? So I look at my boots and he's like, what do you see? I go, I don't know, grass clippings. He's like, no, what else do you see? I'm looking and I'm like, they're wet. He goes, exactly. He goes, it hasn't rained here. And my daddy always said, if there's dew on your boots, it's not going to rain. So we're going to cut the hay. And I was like, yeah, that's cute. But look at the thunderclouds right there. Right. So I'm freaking out. Willis is making a grave mistake. All his hay is going to be ruined. I get in the buggy with Kathy and his daughter, and we go a couple miles away to do something. It's pouring rain on us, pouring rain for like hours, dumping rain. We start driving back, and I'm looking at Kathy like, I'm so sorry that your Amish husband made this mistake and didn't listen to this 7-day-old farmer. But I told them not to cut the hay, and it's pouring rain. Listen, Kelly, we get half a mile from their farm, and I'm not kidding you. It's like we went through a movie set where it's like a rain machine, and then it was just dry. And she's like, the smile on her face lit up. It didn't even rain there. So we pulled into the driveway. This is hours later, and Willis is just standing there with his arms crossed. And I get out, and he's like, there was dew on your boots. And I tell that story because like there's an actual connection to the earth. There's an actual rhythm to nature. There's laws that nature gives us that we're ignoring now for the sake of like the weather app on our phone, and it's just like, no, like to tap back into the humanity of who we are and how we're connected to the earth is vital. And I'm telling you, working with these animals, shearing the sheep, working the land, helping them bale the hay, all of these things, I honest to God believe, we talk about the microbiomes and things in our bodies. I think that dirt was getting under my fingernails, into my body, into my blood. And I think that those things begin to heal. And so, yeah, some people listening to this may live in downtown New York and they're like, how can I do this? There are ways. There are literal ways to get back connected to nature. And I think it is vital and a powerful thing that we're missing out on.
I have to imagine your sleep improved like exponentially.
Oh my gosh. It was, well, when I was with the Amish, I was just freaking exhausted. Like I was so tired, right? We would drink coffee at 8 p.m. and it didn't even affect us because we worked so hard all day. But yeah, my sleep was amazing. It was probably 4 days of bad sleep at the monastery and then the best sleep of my entire life, especially because again, I wasn't consuming as I go to bed, right? Like as that really has an effect on how we sleep. And so my sleep was amazing. And again, as you know, and as you've talked about a lot on your podcast and in your books and things, sleep is one of the major contributors to healing in our bodies and in our lives. And I don't think we pay attention to it as much as we need to.
Yeah. Or we've just kind of adopted this like normal. It's normal to get up at 2 a.m. and have your mind race for 2 hours and then maybe get 1 more hour of sleep in before you wake up. And so how, like, are you going to need, a 7-week fast every year? Maybe you only need 2 weeks quarterly, or like, I mean, two weeks, twice a year. What's your fasting schedule, or how, without anything drastic, how do you maintain balance now?
Yes. So good. I'm glad you asked that question. You don't have to move to a Amish farm or a monastery in order to pull this off. I did it for you. You can read all about it. What you can do, what everyone can do, that I challenge everyone to do, is to start small. I'm telling you, start small and work your way up. Start small means 1 hour, 1 day a week, where you are completely disconnected from screen. Like go put your phone in the mailbox, like put it, and then the next week I want you to do 3. I just want you to keep doubling it. Okay. So start at 2, then go to 4, then go to 8, or you can add 2 hours and do 6. The goal being, I think every single person listening to this podcast, if we can get to 1 24-hour cycle, continuous, a week, where we are disconnected from screens, 6 days a week, to your heart's content, Netflix, all the things. But if you can get, and really, honestly, that's really only 12 hours because you're sleeping the other 12. So, well, not 12 for most of us, but if you can get to 1 24-hour, so this is what I do every single week. There's 1 24-hour cycle of the sun where I don't look at a single screen. I still do it. I'm still a content creator. I'm a podcaster. I'm a YouTube, all the things. I'm making all the videos, but there's one where I'm completely disconnected. And my family, they know that if I'm not with them, it's when I'm with my family, but sometimes it's when I'm without them. I'll make sure to give them ways to get a hold of me if they can. That's everyone's biggest fears. But what if something happens that I need to know about? Listen, from the dawn of humanity up until these phones were created, people spent more than 24 hours disconnected from other people. So if you can do it for one day, that's the goal. One day a week, every week. Work your way up to it. It may take you a year to get there, but once you get there, what I've found from people that have done this, that have helped them do this, is that one day sometimes turns into two. And then sometimes they're like, we're going to do a whole vacation where for 7 days we don't look at any screens. It just, when you taste life and the goodness on the other side of the screen, it makes you not want to pick up your phone. And so, that, I don't know if I told you this, but when I came home for those 3 weeks with my family and I wasn't on a screen, I did not implement one single rule for my family. Like all my teenagers, I didn't say you have to be off your phone because dad's off your phone. No, they were on Netflix, they were on all the things. But their screen time got cut in half simply because dad wasn't on his phone. So, it's possible. And I think it's actually very healing for all of us to really try to find at least 16 hours of awake time where we don't look at a single screen. That's the goal. And I challenge everyone to do it.
I love this. I'm going to dive deeper into this, but as you just said, the 3 weeks with your family. So you went 2 weeks with the Benedictine monks, 2 weeks with the Amish,
Yes.
and then 3 weeks at home, screenless with your family.
Yes. Yes. And my family was still on screen. So they were still watching TV. I would just leave the room, if they turn on Netflix or whatever.
You weren't just like peeking back in, like.
Yeah, no, because I was so scared of my brain getting result scans. Like all I could think about were my brain scans. I was like, oh my God, I don't want to go back to Dr. Amen. And he's gonna be like, but on November 7th, are you sure you didn't watch TV? I'm like, yeah. There's a little spike. But yeah, so no, there was no, even walking through the airport, because I had to fly from LAX to Cleveland, Ohio, to in between the monks and the Amish. I was so scared. There were screens everywhere. Like I on the back of every airplane seat, I'm just like trying to not mess my brain up the whole time. But yeah, I lived with my family. I spent 2 weeks with them at home, and then we did 1 week in Yellowstone together. And it was amazing. My daughter, who was 17 at the time, told me, I said, what's it been like, Dad, without a screen? And this is what she said. I don't think she chose this word on purpose. I think it just came out. She said, Daddy, this is the purest version of you I've ever experienced. And, and she was right. It was because I was completely present the whole time. And so, yeah, it was very valuable to do that. And some of my kids do it too now. They do 24 hours without a screen as well. And they love it. And they're getting their friends to do it. And they're a generation that doesn't know what life was like before. And so they're now tasting it, going like, this is awesome. And so, yeah, I think there's the art of being human that we can teach a rising generation about that they have no idea about.
Wow. Is it a Sunday? Is the Sunday the 24 hours?
It goes random every,
okay.
Sometimes it's a Wednesday, sometimes it's Friday. I look at my calendar and I'm like, okay, what's the day of the week that I become invisible to anyone but my family? And yeah, pick it.
Cool. You're a content creator. Instagram, like I get inspired to share. I am an oversharer just in general. My human design is to like experience life and to share and teach, like literally, but you're doing it with such grace and ease, and it stresses me out. I overthink everything. I edit. I got to make it perfect. And then it just paralyzes me and I don't post anything for like weeks.
Yeah.
So how do you do what you do and just like stay sane? How do you, I just want to like put stuff out there, but then I overthink, like, I don't want to offend this person or I don't want to share. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. So like for me, in kind of the space I exist in, this is gonna sound weird, but I'm leaning into this more and more. People call me sometimes. They're like, Carlos, you're like the Black Mr. Rogers for grownups, is what people say, like on Instagram. And I was like, what? Initially, when someone first said that, I was like, what does that mean? But then I'm like, well, I'm kind of like this safe space for people to, maybe we talk about hard things in grace-filled ways. And like suddenly, like so I think I talk about things that would cancel a lot of people. But I've built such a platform of trust for so long with my audience that that trust has been I think has been the thing that I've been able to really lean into as I'm creating a lot of things, right? And so I've just gotten to the place because I'm a content creator, but I wrote a book called Reconnected about not being on your phone, where I tell people, listen, like I'm actually on my phone now 3 hours and 10 minutes a day. So I was on my phone 7.5 hours a day. Now I'm basically 3.5. I've gained 4 hours a day back in my life, and I'm still creating as much, if not more, than I was creating before. And so, I feel like I trimmed the fat off of my phone use is what I did. But I think, what you're asking very specifically about getting sometimes stuck in the space of like wanting your content just to be so pure, like good, right? Just like really like, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think people, at least for me, even this conversation with you, Kelly, like you were like, you're just like authentic. The way you smile, listening to my stories, like I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to talk to her for like 2 hours. Like you have this sense about you that is so authentic and it's so easy, that I think, you probably are overthinking yourself out of sharing some things that you probably should share, that doesn't need to be perfect. Yesterday, I had a whole plan. My Instagram plan yesterday was like, I asked people that voted for Trump and voted for Kamala the same question. I asked my Instagram audience. And so I had all these screenshots of these things I was going to share. I was like, guys, we're going to have hard conversation today. We're going to have it in grace-filled ways. I'm going to be, bring us together, bridge the divide. But in the morning, I went in my front yard and gave a tour of my inflatables. I've got all my Christmas inflatables up. And in the tour, my wife had bought this little Bluey. It was called Bluey, this little dog that I'd never heard of in my life. It's a cartoon character.
We watch Bluey, yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, does anyone on Instagram know what this dog is? Like, I didn't want to put it up. It ruins the aesthetic of my yard. But my wife said all the kids in the neighborhood are going to love it. And of course, everyone's like, that's Bluey. That's Bluey. So I'm telling you this for a reason, this story, because I think this can be helpful in just allowing the greater, whoever you think that is in your life, to guide your day. So I was like, oh, Bluey. And everyone's like, you got to watch this episode. You got to watch it. Bluey's like you, but like a dog cartoon character. And I was like, what does this mean? So I go and I film myself watching my very first Bluey episode. And so I filmed myself watching, it was called Sleepy Time was the name of the episode. And I watch it. And it was only 7 minutes long, and it destroyed me. I am weeping by the end of this episode. It's about my daughter, my oldest daughter just got married, and she gave me her piggy that she slept with before she got married. The day she got married, she's like, take care of Piggy for me, Daddy. I'm watching this Bluey episode about this little girl and her piggy, and I'm like, crying. So I post that video just to let you know, Kelly, this was not in my plan. This was not in my whatever. That video has over 1.2 million views. In like 6 hours on Instagram, and over, I don't know, maybe 15 million views on TikTok. And suddenly my day got hijacked by this random video I made about Bluey watching an episode. And I just thought to myself when I went to bed last night, I was like, that was the way the day was supposed to go on my socials. Like that I had my plan. And if I would have stuck to my plan and not gone that way, then it would. And so like my offering to you and to anyone else that's listening to this that does stuff like this for a living is, maybe just loosen up a little bit your grip on it. And I bet there's some surprises in store for you that you weren't expecting.
I love it. That's so beautiful. Yeah. I think a lot of my parenting stress, and I only have one
Sure
5-year-old girl, and I know a lot of people have like 4, 5, 6.
Listen, one human being to be in charge of is a lot. Okay.
It's a lot. Thank you. And kudos to everybody that have multiples. But yes. So I think like all of my suffering comes from expectations I have and plans I hold that she derails every moment of every day. And now I'm like, I'm doing something, or I'm sending, maybe like a little bit of a triggered response. And then she comes in and I'm just like, I just want to get it done. And I'm getting frustrated with her. And I'm just like, okay, wait. The point is not to get frustrated with her. And so I just look at her like intrusions and like derailments of my plans now as like God redirecting me, because I'm like, okay, clearly this text is not meant to be sent. Probably better because I'm in a little bit of a triggered state. And so that awareness is there,
Okay. One more thing about this. I think this is so good. What I try to do my hardest is to look at interruptions as invitations. So every single time I'm interrupted, I try to move it from an interruption to an invitation. And whenever that happens, just like you're doing with your daughter, or whether it be with whatever is interrupting you, I think, okay, so I'm being interrupted for a reason right now. And it may not even be for the interrupter, right? It may be for me, but like, how can I move from an interruption to an invitation? And I think that's what you're doing. I think that's the thing that I think can bring a little bit more breath to all of our days. So
Yeah.
kudos to that. Yeah.
Thank you. It's an invitation to be present and go, okay,
Yes.
I'm just like gripping down this thing and trying to force an effort life rather than breathe. Okay, this is coming and like you
Yes.
said, loosen your grip on the expectations of how things should be.
Yes.
We're shooting all over life.
Yes. We're shooting all over it.
Well, what's your last, key takeaway for Reconnected and what is your hopes for it?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I think my hopes are, um, that that people fall back in love with, I call it the lost art of being here. There's an art to getting lost and finding our way. There's something uniquely human about getting lost and not having GPS telling me 800 feet to turn here or well, I want people to fall back in love with all of these things: savoring, wondering, noticing, getting lost and finding our way, looking at the dew on your boots, like what the table, like all of these things that are uniquely human that we've lost because of these things. What my hope is that everyone that reads this book or watches the documentary leaves going like, okay, this is actually not only attainable, but I'm excited about how quickly this can begin to heal things in my life. And so, what I hope is that your listeners listen to this conversation and then are like, no, this can actually happen today. Like today I can fall back in love with the art of being human. And hopefully I've given, and you've helped me give some handlebars for them to hang on to and do that.
Oh, Carlos, you are a dream. Thank you
Oh,
for your work and your presence and your light and your energy and for coming on the podcast. Where can people follow you, find you,
yes.
etc.?
Yeah, no. At Loswhit, Loswhit on Instagram. You can find me on X, but I'm normally grumpy over there. So just hang out over on Instagram where all the light and the goodness is. And and then if you go to carloswhitaker.com, everyone can on my merch store, there's the documentary. You can get the book there as well. But I think the documentary is really good for families to watch together. It's funny, you'll see me struggling to shear sheep and all kinds of stuff that I did with the Amish. So you can find me on those two places.
Amazing. I can't wait to see images of real life Willis and
Yes,
Lane,
that's right. You'll get them.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And this has been an honor.
You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to the Heal with Kelly podcast. Be sure to tune in every Thursday for more empowering wisdom and inspiring healing stories. And make sure you hit the follow button on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts so you don't miss that one episode that holds the answer you've been searching for. Oh, and if you found this episode inspiring, please rate, review, and share Heal with Kelly so that we can grow our audience and reach more people. We truly appreciate it. Lots of love.